So Lou, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Lou Justament. I'm a professor down at the University of Alabama at Birmingham in the Department of Microbiology. And I am a past president of FASEB and vice chair of the Leadership Development Committee currently.
Thanks, Lou. Marcello, please. Society, your name, society, and where you work.
Yes, thank you, Patricia. So my name is Marcelo Bonini. I'm a professor of medicine at Northwestern University. I represent the Society for Redox Biology and Medicine, and I have been the chair or past chair of the DEI committee and now VP elect for FASEB DEI. Thank you.
Lauren?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Walker. I am representing the American Association of Immunologists, and I currently work as a toxicologist at Colgate-Palmolive.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, Tom Clemens. I'm at the University of Maryland Department of Orthopedics, representing the American Society for Bone and Mineral Research.
Thank you.
I'm the treasurer-elect.
Okay, thank you. Patrick?
Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Pagano. I'm at the University of Pittsburgh, Department of Pharmacology, Chemical Biology. I've had a long-term interest in advocacy and government, along with science, and I represent the Society for Free Radical Biology and Medicine.
Thank you. Frank?
Hi, everyone. Frank Krause. I'm the Executive Director and CEO at FASEB. Thank you for the time today, but or more importantly, thank you for the time over the next whatever period of your tenure with us to help advance science on behalf and with your societies.
Thanks. Sally?
Yes, I'm Sally Schwetman. I'm the Director of Governance and Leadership Development at FASEB. So I'm here to make sure that you have everything you need to do your job as a board member at FASEB.
And Mary Beth?
Hi, everyone. Mary Beth Ruth. I work with Sally and Frank in the executive office. It's great to meet you all.
And I see Varun.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Rushang. I am a scientist at Bristol Myers Squibb, located in New Jersey, and I look forward to working with every one of you.
Thank you. And I'm Patricia Morris. I'm the immediate past president of FASEB. I'm a scientist at the Rockefeller University, and I represent the Society for the Study of Reproduction, and I'm a member of 4 of the societies of the Federation. So I think, Sally, we can get started.
Yeah.
Okay, so following today's session, we'll cover 3 items, and we're going to outline how we would conduct ourselves as board members. And the session will really include these 3 items, which our Director of Governance and Leadership Development will expertly guide us through. Next slide.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's like, it got, okay, there we go.
Okay, so now there are a lot of board norms, and I'm not going to read them out to you, but if you go to our volunteer portal, which is really key for you to get familiar, if you're not already, with the member clicks, with the board duties and norms, you can review them. I'm sure you're aware of them, but this slide and the next slide is really going to develop into a little bit more detail on Thursday in our session at 12 o'clock noon Eastern time. So I think, again, I encourage you to go to member clicks. The next slides will be, as I said, expertly taken us through by Sally Schwetman.
Okay, so as promised, so our last session was very reporting heavy. So this session, we would like to, and some of this will seem a little silly, but we want to actually talk about some of these board norms. We did not have a ton of time to look over them. We'll just like slide back real quick. But these are some hypothetical questions that I would like to everybody to take a minute and think about, and then we will discuss whether or not you think the people in these examples are abiding by the board norm, and if so, why not? Or if so, why?
So I see a problem with 1 and 3.
Okay, tell us about what's the problem with number 1.
1 is really kind of discussing maybe breaking a confidentiality. I don't know if it's a confidentiality of a decision that's voted upon unanimously or not. So that should stay probably within the board. And number 3 is, I'm sorry, I missed that. Number 3, yeah, it's just being disrespectful.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll go back to this slide. So number 1 is, and we will talk about number 1 in a little bit more detail on Thursday, but we do want to make sure that what happens in the actual board meeting, that is confidential. Like, we are free to talk about decisions that the board made, but we don't want to talk about what actually happened during the deliberation. And then number 3, yes, it's just honest space, not treating somebody with respect. So what about, does anybody have any thoughts about number 2?
It sounds fine to me. You know, it's a board member supporting a statement that the society put out as a whole. So I don't see any problem with 2.
So number 2, you are mostly right, but there's only a few people that are expressly supposed to speak on behalf of the organization, and those are our president and Frank. So basically with this though, and one issue that's right here, Marcelo, is that it's the treasurer asking to speak about the diversity statement. What will happen most of the time is that somebody, like, let's say it was a diversity statement, and then we get a call from somebody in the press, and then we would actually go to you and Lauren and ask for you all to provide a quote for that. So that's typically how it happens. We actually did have an incident last year where a reporter contacted one of our early career representatives directly, and then she just got in touch with us. And basically what they were asking is not for her to speak on behalf of the board, but in her opinion as an early career researcher about that. So there's not really I mean, sometimes we should not be calling people names, but without right or wrong questions, just feel free to get in touch with me or Frank or the presidents, Marianne, Kevin, Beth, and then they'll let you know, yes, go ahead, speak freely, or no, we probably should have one of the presidents do that. So, okay, so again, you can go back and read all of these board norms on your own time. We also have a kind of placemat thing at all of the board meetings that has our strategic plan on one side, and on the back side, it has our board norms and our fiduciary duties. So they should always be right in front of you. So next, Patricia, do you want to run through our evaluation and assessment?
Yeah, I'll just point out that Mary Beth has kindly put the link to the board norms in
Thank
the.
you, Mary Beth.
Thanks. Okay, so to ensure that we're meeting all the expectations of the board norms, both individually and collectively as a board, FASEB really works to have a culture that encourages values and evaluation and assessments. So you can see here that the board does an annual assessment of how effectively the board functions as a group, whether or not we're employing the best practices, and the participation and individual satisfaction. And I mentioned last session that one of the board duties is to effectively evaluate the CEO and how he achieves and makes progress on identified priorities and objectives. And ultimately, we want to be able to assess not only what programs have been initiated, but what the committees are doing to engage the federated member societies and implement these initiatives with staff assistance, of course. So I'll now turn things back over to Sally to talk about the volunteer code of conduct.
Yes, so the board recently, and recently means June, just adopted a volunteer code of conduct. And so the full code can be found under our values and policies on the volunteer portal. And this code is based on a model created by the Society's Consortium in Sexual Harassment and STEM. That's a group that FASEB sits on. We were a founding member and we sit on the executive committee. And what makes this code a little bit different than others that you may have seen is it really speaks more aspirationally about how we hope that we are conducting ourselves rather than outlining prohibited behavior. So, so one of the things that you will see in this code is, you know, that we are striving to have honesty in the conduct and attribution of our work rather than saying don't plagiarize. This slide just goes over the purpose and coverage. And again, you'll see in the purpose and the goal, it is meant to be an aspirational document that really, instead of being, you know, punitive and defining what we don't want to do, it talks about what we are striving to do. There's an asterisk here on applies to all FASEB volunteers in FASEB associated activities. The Society's Consortium has really been a leader in making sure that volunteers and other entities in the sciences are behaving well at all times. And so there is some verbiage in the conduct that if a volunteer does something outside of their FASEB role, that they break the law or another society, you know, finds wrongdoing or there's a finding of wrongdoing at their academic institution, that FASEB can ask them to leave their volunteer role. The key provisions of the Code of Conduct are listed here. In July, you will receive an annual disclosure in which you will acknowledge that you've received, read, and understood and agree to abide by the code. And the code also has a procedure for dealing with non-financial conflicts of interest. So this often comes up when we're talking about award recipients or fellowships or things of that nature. We have a very specific conflict of interest policy that applies for financial situations, and you will all need to sign that as well. And we will talk about that a little bit later today when we get into that. But because you are a fiduciary for FASEB, there's a whole other level that you have to disclose any other areas that you could be financially conflicted. And then our auditors actually do ask for that, for those, for copies of those every year. But we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So before we turn to our board fiduciary duties, are there any questions so far? Great. So please feel free to use the raise hand function if anything comes up at any time. So, okay, so we're going to start off. So a little pop quiz here. Board members have 3 fiduciary duties. Does anybody have any idea what they are? I might actually ask Lauren, Lauren's been on the leadership development committee, so she might know them, but does anybody know what the 3 fiduciary duties are? It's okay that you don't. That's what we're here for. So the 3 fiduciary duties are the duty of care, loyalty, and obedience. And these apply to all nonprofit board of directors. So this isn't something FASEB thought up. This is legal standards. So the term fiduciary comes from the Latin term for faith or trust. And the fiduciary responsibility speaks to the relationship between one party, in this instance, you, a board member, who is obligated to act in the best interest of another party, and that other party is FASEB. Nonprofit board of directors are legally bound by these fiduciary responsibilities because this gives governments, sorry, I'm getting governments and governance confused. It gives governments to allow us to have this nonprofit status that Frank talked about on Friday. It gives the government an assurance that that nonprofit organizations and all of those who are involved with them aren't profiting from the organization's effort. And so if we, again, to go back to that nonprofit definition we talked about on Friday, if an individual is profiting, then we are no longer a nonprofit, we are a for-profit. We saw this slide on Friday as well, but just to reiterate, these are the main things that board members are responsible for. Overall, board members are stewards of FASEB's assets. And so you can see none of these things are trivial right here. And our fiduciary duties define what is legally required to ensure that FASEB is well managed and financially sound. So we are going to go through all 3 in detail, but before we do that, does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay. So a discussion question. Can somebody elect not to hold a fiduciary responsibility, and then that basically like gets them out of, it's their get out of jail card? Can you do that? Okay.
At the risk of giving the wrong answer, I don't think so.
No.
No, you cannot. And so Christian has his hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is Chris Sell here from Philadelphia.
Yes.
I missed Friday and I apologize. But yeah, I think you can elect not to, but then you have to resign, right?
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
more.
Yes, that is, yeah, Marcelo got the first half and you got the second half. The only way you can give up your fiduciary responsibility is to resign from the board. This is why we do not allow proxies to vote on the board, because they do not have the same fiduciary responsibility. And Frank, I hope I'm not putting him on the spot, but Frank, can you speak real quick about our directors and officers insurance?
Let me get off mute. Yes, so to reassure everyone, FASEB does carry comprehensive directors and officers insurance. That also includes publications insurance. It also covers the officers of the staff officers, which is myself, in the organization. And that is to protect you in case legal action is brought against the organization, right? So as long as you as individuals and collectively are executing your best judgment consistent with the fiduciary duties of the board, the care, loyalty, and what I just forget.
Obedience.
Thank you, obedience. That's what I always forget. It's the hardest one for me. No, I'm just kidding. As long as you are acting in the best interest of the organization to the best of your abilities, that directors and officers insurance protects you from any legal actions brought against the organization or against you as an individual director of the organization.
So I see hands up. I'm not sure. Tom, I think it's the first one.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, how we manage our fiduciary responsibility to the society we represent as opposed to FASEB, because sometimes these are going to be perhaps in conflict.
We are going to talk about that in much more detail later today. So that is my short answer.
Hold that thought for a minute, Tom.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is also, that's kind of the trickiest part of FASEB governance is you just let the cat out of the bag on that one. So, okay. So first we will talk about your duty of care. So this is the duty of care that you owe to FASEB. Oh, I actually have Patricia doing this. Patricia, do you want to jump in and do this?
Oh, I actually have that you're doing
Oh,
it.
okay, okay. It might not match so what I'm doing. So I'll just keep going. So, so the duty of care requires active engagement and that you're making an informed decision. And informed decisions are only possible if you're reading the materials, if you're reading emails from Sally, she will get it, and you're reviewing the background materials in your agendas. So that also duty of care requires showing up. So if you're, and we have in our bylaws a requirement for attendance for board members, and our president will be in touch with your executive officer to, if somebody is missing a lot of meetings, to encourage that maybe there's somebody else that should be appointed in that role. Okay, so this brings us to our set of discussion questions on the duty of care. So Sam has been a member of the board for 2 years. He attends most meetings, but often only skims advanced materials and tends to multitask during virtual meetings. Is Sam abiding by the duty of care? And could this cause problems for Sam, his society, or the board? What do people think?
Anyone?
Big problem.
Yeah. Yes, he's not abiding by his duty of care. He should, yes, we need people to pay attention. As you will hear later on, like FASEB is really dealing with some big issues right now, and so we really need to make sure that our board members are coming to meetings prepared and paying attention while they're there. So we all know how virtual meetings go. And could this cause problems for Sam, Sam's societies, the board? So for Sam and the board, if the board takes a action, makes a decision that then somebody wants to sue FASEB for, because Sam is not abiding by his duty of care, that is a violation of the fiduciary responsibilities and could open him or her up for liability. So it's very rare that happens, but it is a possibility. And then for Sam's society, I think it's, Sam's society isn't being adequately represented on the board. Okay, so now on to our duty of loyalty. So this is where we're going to talk more about our role, or I'm saying our role, your role with FASEB and your member society. So the duty of loyalty requires that each director give undivided allegiance to FASEB without regard or personal interest, business interest, or the interest of any other region or organization. So it's a breach of the duty of loyalty for a director to use information gained in the performance of his or her responsibility for personal benefit, or to benefit your region, your business, or another organization. And board members must act in the interest of FASEB, not the society that appointed them. And so this is something we just mentioned this, and people are already saying this. This is something we always wrestle with at FASEB. As a federation, it is just a natural tension. And so the way, and Frank puts this really nicely in a lot of places, is like, you are a representative of your society and a board member of FASEB. But when you're in the FASEB boardroom making decisions, the decision has to be in the best interest of FASEB, not your member society. And Frank puts it, and now I hope I don't butcher it. I thought I had it in my notes, but you are how do you say it? It's like you're a representative of your, wait, how, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Represent your society in discussion. So your society's perspectives, right? Whether it's on a science policy issue or anything else, should be shared with the board. But when it comes time to vote, right? So we have very open discussion, subject to all of those board norms and guidelines that Sally referenced earlier, right? Very open discussion, and that is intentional. However, you need to kind of change hats when it comes time to vote, right? So once a motion's on the floor, right, then it's discussion and decision from a FASEB centric perspective. So it can be a bit of a challenge. We call it, it's a dual director sort of role. For those of you that have fiduciary responsibilities to your society that you're representing, if there's a fiduciary conflict, so for example, Tom, I don't know that you're current treasurer for Bone and Mineral Research, but I think you're past, right? So I don't think you have a current fiduciary responsibility to SFRBM. But if someone did, right, if you're a current treasurer or officer for your organization, and there is a potential conflict, you should disclose that potential conflict in advance of the discussion of the issue, so that the board can talk about that conflict and make a decision whether or not you should recuse yourself from that discussion. In many cases, just noting the conflict is going to make everyone aware, and you're still going to continue in the discussion and perhaps be recused from the vote on the matter in order to make people comfortable with being able to maintain their responsibilities to both organizations.
Rushang has a question.
Yes, hi, thank you. I was just curious to know, a very naive question, do early career representatives represent as their society or just as individuals as early career reps?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was actually going to jump into it. And I think this time last year in this presentation, one of our early career representatives asked the same question. So our early career representatives and our officers are in a slightly different situation. When you become an officer or you're an early career representative, you are no longer representing your society, you're representing FASEB. Now, you're still coming into that role with the experience of being a society member, with your experience of being an early career representative, but you are different. It is a different role than a society appointed board member. So anytime you have questions about something, feel free to ask. I will also encourage you to talk to Denise and Sophia, who are our current early career representatives. They've been really great about asking me whenever they were, concerned about a situation, and I think it's really helped the situation. Christian?
Yeah, I just wanted to actually mention that I am past treasurer and remain on the financial board for the Age Association. So I don't know where we want to note that, but certainly in discussions, I'll note it. But I wanted to let you guys know that does exist.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And then we will actually, you set this up wonderfully. I did mention earlier, we have a conflict of interest policy and disclosure. And so Christian and anybody else, if you are on the board or council for a society, that needs to be listed on your conflicts of interest disclosure form. And and it's basically if you are a voting position in those roles. So if it's an ex officio, you can go ahead and list it, but it probably doesn't matter. And in the disclosure form, and I would say if we get to an issue where you think you may be conflicted, please let either myself, Frank, or Marianne Bjornsky know. So the disclosure is the most important effort in all of our conflict of interest, and then we will determine how it should be dealt with. Does that make sense for everybody? So we'll be reaching out with the conflict of interest disclosure in the next few weeks. And just so you're aware, so that has to be, we have to have that on file every calendar year. So the volunteer code of conduct is going to be the volunteer year, which is July 1 till June 30th. But the conflict of interest form and disclosure, we have to do every calendar year. So, and as I mentioned, our auditors ask to see every single one from all of our fiduciaries, which is not only our board members, but also our audit committee members and our finance committee members. And Frank has to sign one every year as well. So, okay. So here's a discussion question. Sam represents the American Conglomeration of Alchemy on the FASEB board. He also serves on, I did not change that. It should be ACA's council. The FASEB board has performed a market analysis and now proposes to raise membership dues by 10%. How should Sam vote and why? And what information should influence Sam's vote? Anybody want to speak up?
Let me try here.
Okay.
Sam should, because of the duty of allegiance, to think about what's in the best interest of FASEB. If the proposal to raise the 10% is fair according to the market values, and vote according to what's better for FASEB. So if it's the market indicates that the 10% is fair and is current with the market, Sam should vote in favor of that, despite what ACA thinks.
Anybody disagree with Marcelo? Agree?
Well, I think it's complicated because, you know, and this raises another question: how much do you consult, or can you consult with people, and how much a burden this increase would be to your members? So what responsibility do you have to your members, and in turn to FASEB, if you think that the membership dues being raised by 10% is going to cause half of them to drop out of the society? I guess that comes up in discussion, right? So maybe this is all moot, but I don't think it's as simple as just saying I'm going to do what FASEB, just toe the line, that this is a reasonable inflationary increase, and I'm just going to go with it. I think you have to be informed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that information from your own society will help inform your vote. And yes, I think you laid that analysis out correctly. I think Marcelo did as well. So you can see again, it's like the mixture of the two. I saw Christian's hand raised. Did you?
Yeah, I was just thinking that in the process, this is, I don't know the procedures for voting, but certainly one can table the vote and bring this back to the society to get their input, which would be important, right?
Yeah. And I will say that we, and this will be something we talk a little bit more about Thursday, but we would never, this would never come to the board without it being very much getting feedback from all constituencies. If there was anything like this, it would go to our Executive Officers Advisory Committee. Frank would have probably had a lot of one-on-one meetings with societies, as well as our other presidents, like, and also it would have been brought up to the board months and months ago, who then would be communicating with their societies and having time to think about it. So rest assured, we're not going to like take any big votes. Just nothing should surprise the board is what we try to say. But yes, you're right. That's the kind of information that would inform. So I see Marcelo and then Frank.
This is an interesting one, actually, because let's say that all this consulting with the societies happen, and the vast majority, 80%, is okay with the increase, but ACA happens not to be. And I am in both boards. So,
yeah,
you know, that it's a vote of conscience, or, you know, one membership, like being the FASEB board, takes precedence over being the ACA board.
or abstain.
Mhm.
So that's a possibility as well. You could always abstain. We do try to avoid that as much as we can. Conflicts of interest are probably the biggest reason for someone to abstain. We really try to, we encourage you not to abstain because you don't agree with what you think the final vote's going to be, right? You're there to be engaged, right? So abstaining because you're like, they're going to vote to approve it, or or whatever, but I disagree with it. But I don't want to say no because that's kind of insulting to my other board members, right? Then make the no vote, right? So limit your abstentions to conflicts, really, that prevent you from voting. However, to Marcelo's point, where you're representing multiple societies or perspectives, again, when we have a discussion like this, there's going to be a lot more information that's provided. When it comes time to vote, you have to look at the information in total and make what you feel is the best decision for FASEB. So even though you may know this society likes it, this society doesn't like it, you have to use your judgment. And as long as you're using your best judgment, the actual end answer and vote doesn't matter per se in terms of your fiduciary responsibilities, right? You're using your best judgment, and your judgment is going to differ, but it has to be from, excuse me, from a FASEB perspective. The other item that I will note is we mentioned, I think it was Christian, you mentioned going back to your society and getting some input there. The board packets for the hour-long board meetings are sent out a week in advance. For our in-person meetings, we try and get them out 2 weeks in advance. The reason we're doing that is to provide you an opportunity to look at your board packet, see what information is being discussed, what items are being discussed, and if you need additional discussion with your society, like you want to talk with your executive director or your president or whoever, you should be doing that during that period, right? Gathering that information. So that's part of the reason why when we get the packet, we all know, I'm on a board myself for society executives. We all know it's tempting to just leave it sit till you're on the plane and you read it on your way. But the reason it's sent out in advance is so you can take a look at it and see if you need to gather additional information before you fly to the or drive or whatever you may do to the board meeting.
So Sally, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
To your point about not reporting no votes, by process of elimination, anyone could figure out who did vote no. So is there any other way? Can it be kept confidential, and whether should it be confidential?
We don't record yes votes either. So it's just to make sure. So you have to record an abstention, and this is in our conflict of interest policy. So because like as Frank mentioned, if you have a conflict and you are abstaining because of that conflict, we have to note it so that if somebody were to say, well, that person made a decision, in the interest of whoever, we can put in the minutes, no, they didn't actually vote. And we have board members that work for the federal government, like NIH or something, and they can't vote on some things that come up. And then, so we have to note that too. And then they actually, NIH and some of these other places have ethics officers that can ask to look at some of those things. So that's why we have to record abstentions, but we don't, like every yes, no is confidential. It's just abstentions that we have to record.
Yeah, I was just going by the word of your response.
Yes, no, I left out, I left something out there. So thank you. And Patricia, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly underscore Frank, since he joined us 5 or 6 years ago now, has a firm commitment to transparency. And so before you would have to make such an assessment, you will have clearly all the financial information that you need to inform you. It will have been presented to the board in a very clear fashion. And so your ability to make a judgment on this particular issue will be informed by evidence and by Frank and Julie, who is our financial consultant.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add to that as well, that it will be a board decision whether or not to take a vote. on something. And it's not common, but we've had it happen several times where we bring something to the board with an anticipation of a motion. And after the board discusses, they're like, it's not the right path to go. And then the board, led by the president, the chair, will provide direction to staff of, we need more information, or we need to change this, and we'll go back and we'll do that. So the board will make that those sorts of decisions. You control the direction that it goes.
Okay, so we have one more discussion question, but I'm going to kind of speed through it just in the interest of time. So we have a board member, Claire, who's also a consultant for a scientific publisher, and FASEB is considering signing a substantial contract with that publisher. What do you think Claire should do? Okay, Brushank.
Disclose that she serves as a consultant in this scientific publisher. I don't know if that could harm in any way, just that it's Claire's responsibility to disclose and bring it up, and the board can decide.
Absolutely. Perfect. You get my onboarding gold star. So that's absolutely right. Just I would say in my experience, most of the time when people disclose their conflict, it's dealt with very, very easily. In this instance, she probably is going to have to abstain from a vote, but she'll probably be able to stay in the room. We might not want her to be a part of the discussion, but we would likely keep her in the room. The only time, and I haven't seen this happen at FASEB, the only time that I've had a big conflict issue was when somebody didn't disclose it, and then it came back to bite everybody involved in the end. So, okay, our final fiduciary duty is the duty of obedience. And so a lot of people hate this word. This is one of those, I went to law school, so this is just one of those legal terms of art that we just have to live with. But it basically means that we're going to follow the law, we're going to follow whatever policies we have. And this is a big one, where if the board is violating its own bylaws, if it's violating its articles of incorporation, that's where you can get in trouble. And I will just say from personal experience, at a previous organization, they had a gift acceptance policy, and they're like, oh, well, we're going to run it through for this one donor, and we're not going to make them do it. And then now you can read about this issue in the New York Times. So it's also it may not be legally problematic, but it's one of those things. If you saw the FASEB board of directors on the front page of the Washington Post, is this what you would want it to say? So quickly, we're going to talk about, so these are the documents that govern our work as a board. So at the top, we have our bylaws, and even above that, we could actually say, so FASEB is incorporated in the District of Columbia. So the District of Columbia laws apply, the IRS federal laws that govern nonprofits apply, and then we have our articles of incorporation, which basically lay out, this is FASEB, this is generally what FASEB does. But then the next part is our bylaws. And our bylaws just really set out in broad strokes the responsibility of the board, and it does spell out the 4 committees that we mentioned on Friday's Friday session. So the bylaws govern everything that we do. Underneath our bylaws are our committee charters. So essentially, the committee charter for the board of directors is our bylaws. It sets out terms, how people get on the board, all of that sorts of things. Committee charters do the same thing, but for all of those different committees that FASEB has. If we have a task force, the task force will have a charter, and they will lay out the purpose, the objectives, what kind of members serve on those, and how members are selected. And committee charters can be changed by the board pretty easily. Bylaws have to go through a whole process, including a supermajority vote to amend the bylaws. Next are just different policies. These can run from, we have a travel expense policy. We have a policy on when FASEB should adopt a statement dealing with a social justice issue, or when FASEB should sign on to an amicus brief. We have a lot of policies there. Again, those can be adopted, amended by a simple majority of the board. And then finally, we have guidelines, procedures, things that we don't need board approval for at all. We put our subcommittee charters in this category, meeting agendas, that sort of thing. So these are all the things that we have to make sure. And I will say, Frank and I are, a big part of our job is knowing all this information so you don't have to. So if you have a question about it, you can come and ask us, but you do not need to memorize any of these information. But it is helpful to know where to find the answers. And all of these things are located on our volunteer portal. Okay, so the discussion here is, this is kind of technical, but so it's Monday, and our president, Charlie, will be completely unavailable next week. Another society has offered to enter into a potentially lucrative memo of understanding, an MOU, with FASEB, but it has to be signed before next Friday. So the FASEB bylaws allow that we can have a special meeting, but the board members must receive an agenda at least 3 days in advance. So it's Monday, we got to get this done before Friday. Should Charlie call a special meeting? Okay, Christian.
I would say yes. I mean, the board bylaws say 3 days, but we can make exceptions, especially in case of an emergency. So I guess yes. And of course, there's multiple things. Why? A lot of discussion. Why would it have to be by this week? So it's an artificial thing. But you know, if this were really the case, I think the answer would be yes. We would have to waive that.
Yes, and I should know off the top of my head, and I don't because I just haven't looked at it in a while. Our bylaws actually do have things in there that it's like the notice, and then but then that can be waived if everybody from the board shows up. There's lots of different things in there. The main thing is that if somebody wants to challenge this memo of understanding, if it wasn't done within the bylaw scriptures, it would be pretty easy to, I mean, somebody would have to do it, but somebody could technically like go to a judge and get an injunction against that happen, or threaten to do so. And FASEB would be on shaky ground because they did not follow their own bylaws. So does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I mean, who deems something lucrative and not? So I guess there can be opinions that would counter the president's decision, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So but we leave it to the discretion of the president. Ultimately, the president decides.
Yes, and our presidents, I think Patricia and Frank can back me up on this, are in communication with each other regularly, with Frank, and nothing like this has happened in the time that I've been at FASEB. So I think this would be very rare that something like this would happen. But it is also my job that if I see something that's starting to look like it's veering into bylaws territory to speak up and say, hey, our bylaws require whatever.
What I'll also offer here is just a reminder that the executive committee could also meet to approve this sort of thing. So it's a much smaller group. Again, regular communication. In fact, the executive committee meets each week to try and ensure the organization can be nimble when issues like this come up. But it really does go back to communication as the key for all of this, remaining in communication with each other to ensure the no surprises rule is followed. And quite honestly, even with this example, we would most likely go back to that other society and say, you have to wait. You know how this works.
Yeah.
And get an extension.
Rushan?
Yeah, so just a naive question. Say, for example, a meeting is called, not just meeting, any general meeting is called, and there is voting supposed to happen for something. And say one or two members aren't there at the meeting, which are supposed to vote. Are they required to vote? And if they are, would like an email communication be considered as their vote? How would that work? Like, just for my understanding.
So we have to have a quorum. So, and a quorum means we can't take any votes unless a majority of the board members are in a majority of the voting members are in attendance. So that would be the main thing. So if this is like a regularly scheduled board meeting, we would have to have that quorum. So sometimes at our executive committee meetings, we don't have a quorum because people are out or whatever, and we have to table something for another week. Since I've been at FASEB, we've always had a quorum for board meetings, so that hasn't been a problem. You can do electronic votes. These are things that are actually governed by wherever the law of where you're incorporated. So this is the District of Columbia. So we do sometimes do electronic votes, not with our board so much because you have to have 100% participation, and we have a really, really big board. But for executive committee, sometimes we do electronic votes, and our finance committee, we've done that. And Tom can attest that when it's a finance committee vote, I have to bug everybody till I get 100% of the people responding. We meet that threshold. Also, oh gosh, I just had a thought on the top of my head, and I just lost it with along this line. Yeah, it must not have been that important. But thank you. That was a great question. And yeah. No. Any other questions on this kind of stuff? Oh, now I remember what I was going to say. Okay, so Frank just mentioned the executive committee, and we showed you that slide last week with all of their headshots on it. So they do meet every week. They meet on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And most of the time, they are only voting on things that the FASEB board, so oftentimes they'll be like, oh, somebody asked us to sign on to a letter. And it will go to the executive committee if it's in line with something the board has already approved. Then we post on the volunteer portal those actions that were taken at the executive committee meeting so that the board is always aware. There have been a few times since I've been on board at FASEB where something came up at an executive committee on an executive committee level, and it was not something the board had previously approved, but we had to act on it because not acting was not an option. So one of these things was after the murder of George Floyd, we felt like we needed to get a statement out. And in those instances, we were in touch with the board right away when it happened. So we did not wait to put it on the website. We had an email communication ready to go the same time we were doing everything. And our presidents were available to answer any and all questions the board might have. So the executive committee can act on behalf of the board, but it's an action that they take very, very seriously. And again, with this culture of transparency with everybody else. Okay. So finally, and this is what you will see on that placemat I talked about that will be at each board meeting, is just the board duties in action. And these are statements that the board agreed to in 2018 at the same time they adopted those board norms. So it's our duty of obedience to support FASEB's mission and purpose and abide by our bylaws and policies. Our duty of care is to prepare for and attend and participate in meetings, and also to ensure that the financial business affairs of FASEB are managed in a responsible manner. And finally, that we will act in the good faith and best interest of FASEB and its membership. Okay, and that brings us to the end. We've got 4 minutes according to my clock. Are there any additional questions?
So number one, thank you, Sally, for such an expert tour de force of the duties of the board members, and by putting together this wonderfully clear demonstration of what you'll be involved in going forward. And so as a reminder, our next onboarding session, where we'll delve a little bit more into some of the norms and the duties that we've reviewed today, will be on Thursday at 12 o'clock. You can send any questions you have to Frank or Sally or myself. And if there are no other questions, I'll just say thank you for everyone's very excellent, really, participation in today's onboarding session. And Sally has demonstrated how expert our staff at FASEB is. So it's always good to have a lawyer on your side. Thank you, Sally. Patrick?
No, that was a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. It was floating on my screen, so I wasn't sure what that meant. Yeah.
Sign off, thumbs up.
Okay. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. We'll see you on Thursday.
See you on Thursday.
Okay.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Bye.